it is 11 a.m. in New York, 5 p.m. in Johannesburg, and 10 p.m. in Bangkok. Welcome to In Transit with Sundae-Bean. I'm an intercultural strategist, transformation facilitator, and solution-oriented coach. And I am on a mission to help you adapt and succeed through any life transition. I've been saying this for about a year now, that we need old solutions to new problems. Yes, you heard that right. Our existing strategies are not working, and we need to do things differently. And oftentimes, the answer is not in inventing something new, but returning to something old, something tested, something that is deeply embedded in cultural wisdom. And our guest today is doing such innovative work where she takes on a massive topic, how to navigate as liberated beings within oppressive systems. Our guest today is Dr. Crystal Menzies, and she is a former educator in urban schools who drew on her personal experience, African diaspora and history, and her Guyanese and African American roots to found an organization called EmancipatED. Today, she develops research-based educational experiences that center Black communities. I've seen her flagship product. It is amazing. And she draws on the stories of maroon communities. Maybe you've never heard of them. Africans who freed themselves from slavery and created hidden societies to offer Black and brown families a model for how to navigate as liberated beings within oppressive systems. What I've learned about Dr. Menzies is she is an educator, an academic at heart, but also has a spirit of openness and playfulness. She lives in the Bay Area in California, enjoys reading, Marvel movies, and daydreaming of Black futures. It is my heartfelt pleasure to welcome you to In Transit, Dr. Menzies.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. So let's dive right in. You have this background in education. You were doing it for years in urban schools, and I'm guessing that you loved it. But something happened where you decided to make a big move of your own, and your life and your work also went in transit. From what I've learned about your background, you branched out and went to find solutions to systemic racism elsewhere. Can you tell us a little bit more about that journey and what inspired you to make the move?
Yeah, so when I was a teacher, I was what was considered a culturally responsive teacher, but I didn't know the term. I just knew I cared about my kids and I had high expectations for them. And two things happened. One, I remember teaching about enslavement and like the Black stories that we often learn, centered in the United States. And one of my students said, "Why are we talking about Black folks all the time?" And this was a Black student. And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" But after doing some digging, I realized he was tired of hearing about like the traumatic narratives. He knew nothing else about Black history. And I realized that's all I'm teaching them. And that's all they're getting exposed to outside of here. So I taught a lesson on rebellions of enslaved peoples in the United States and outside of the United States. And like my kids loved it. And I was also observed that day. So I got written up because it was not a high priority standard, meaning it was unlikely to show up on a standardized test. So I was teaching to one, illuminate the full stories of Black history, but also I noticed my students were carrying the weight of that trauma, and I didn't want that to be what they took away from that experience. So that was one thing. And then another, I lost one student in particular who like gave me a lot of challenges at the beginning of the year, but by the middle of the first semester, she was like my main go-to in the classroom for getting her peers on track. And she was murdered in a drive-by shooting 2 weeks after their 8th grade graduation. So those two stories, there's more, but like that is what propelled me out of the classroom, because initially I thought nobody's studying these larger systemic factors that impact my students' lives. Like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah, right.
And went to a doctoral program, like I'm going to study all these systems. And then through there, it was I was kind of like a ship without a rudder. Like, where do
Yeah.
I go now?
Mhm.
And not just where do I go physically, but like,
Mhm. Mhm.
what am I doing? Because there has to be another way.
Mhm.
And it was through those experiences that I've always been obsessed with maroon communities, but I kept them separate. And
Mhm.
it was through kind of my own self exploration of, I need something I can grasp.
Yeah.
So let me tap back into what has already happened and existed. And that's what
Mhm.
brought me to studying maroon communities and how they could provide a framework for our liberation.
Wow. So for those who are not familiar with the maroon communities, can you give just a brief introduction to who they are?
So maroon
Mm.
communities, I'm going to use the present tense because some still exist,
Mhm.
are communities of self emancipated Africans.
Mhm.
So, folks who ran away from enslavement and created free, hidden societies throughout the Americas. So, any place enslavement existed, there were maroon communities often nearby of
Mm.
various sizes. Some still exist today. Jamaica has several, Colombia, Suriname, and they created their own cultures because they were a melting pot of different
Mhm.
African societies and cultures,
Mhm.
and some folks who had been born on in what we consider the Americas today. And so they have their own free communities.
Hmm. Fascinating. And so, what was it that made you say, like, I'm curious about the day? I'm expecting it was like an epiphany or something where you're like, oh, wait a minute. These are these stories. These are those powerful cultural communities that exist. What if we brought that story and those strategies into new contexts?
hmm It was, it was a day. Like I
Mm.
said, it was always percolating in the back of my mind. And I started to seek out knowledge. And there's these frameworks called Black liberatory pedagogy.
Mhm.
And again, being an educator, I love frameworks. And I realized a lot of the ways we talk about liberation can make it feel unattainable. And
Mhm.
I was like, how can I merge? Because I did a lot of DEI work in organizations.
Mhm.
And I focused on practical, like pragmatic. This is what we can actually change today to
Right.
lead to this bigger thing. But I was like, how can we do that for these bigger systems
Mhm.
and in our day to day lives? And as I was like researching Black liberatory pedagogy, I was like, wait, there's a way I can merge maroonage as a framework and as a
Mhm.
series of active steps with Black liberatory pedagogy. And so created this framework. And this was a year before everything shut down. So created this framework, shared it with a friend. She was like, I love it, but nobody knows who maroon communities are.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was like, you're right. I'm creating this whole fancy thing. And folks don't even know why. But then I tabled it for a little bit. I was in a
Mhm.
crazy job that ended up in the hospital
Mm.
and was still kind of, that was like sitting off to the side and again felt like rudderless again. Like what do I do? Who am I? And
Mhm.
when everything shut down, I moved from Dallas to the Bay Area. I realized a lot of things because I moved closer to family. But the gist is
Mhm.
how separated
Mhm.
we had been becoming prior to the pandemic.
Yes.
I used
Yes.
to grow up in a large neighborhood where we're all playing around together.
Mhm.
Lots of play cousins who I thought were my
Mhm.
real family until I,
Mhm.
learned in like middle
Mhm.
school, oh, we're not actually blood related. We were
Mhm.
losing that even
Mhm.
prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic like exacerbated that and made us
Mhm.
little tiny family units. I saw
Mhm.
what my friends with children were going through, trying to work remotely and educate young children remotely. And we had the uprisings with George Floyd, and it was very much how can I embody these practices? And I
Mhm.
can't embody these practices by myself. It needs to
Right.
be done within a community.
Right.
And that's where the product came from is bringing us back together, getting back to what did you say the old solutions to new
Mhm.
problems.
Mhm.
The solutions are founded in community.
Yep.
So how can we build intentional community? And
Uh,
that's what undergirds this exploration guide I've created.
I just have chills because there's so much to unpack there, right? Like I I remember being in corporate back in 2000, I think 2000, something around there. And we were talking about mega trends. And one of the mega trends is individualization, right? And that is the opposite of collectivism or of community. And I'm thinking about in the US specifically, it's already an individualistic culture. And then it's going even more individualized. And I've even, in the research I've seen, also in collectivistic countries, there is that move to individualization, which is then tearing at the fabric of intergenerational communities or communities of just by geography, right? Like the neighborhood. If there's that kid riding their bike too fast, one of the other people down the street will say, slow down, right? Because you watch over each other, and that all of that is going away. The other thing that I'm thinking about is I always talk about resilience, and we say resilience is not like who can take on the most on their shoulders. It's who can be in community in the way that is the smartest so they can take care of themselves and still take care of others, right? We have so many twisted ideas because of that. We've gone so far away. So now you have this organization called EmancipatED with a capital ED. And you talk about the aim is to support transformation of how we see ourselves as people. I'm guessing the Black and brown communities is where the we is coming from, and the way that you engage with each other as kin. So tell me more about EmancipatED and why that's important to you.
Well, something I mentioned when I was teaching about like the consistent trauma narratives around the Black experience. And this doesn't mean we ignore that history. I mean, it is a part of how we've been shaped. And I'm speaking we specifically as a Black American and Guyanese American. But there's more to that story. And how can we use these stories, one, to bring us back together as larger communities, but also to provide a guide for like, how do we liberate ourselves within these systems? And sounds like very lofty goals, but the core of what this curriculum does is get us back to communal storytelling and learning our family history, learning our local history of resistance and community building and rebellion. So each part, there's 8 activities. And each activity has like a self-reflection component. Then there's a family connection component. But then there's also a component of like get out there in your neighborhood and meet people and do things. And also to invite people into your space when you're doing these activities. Folks you haven't talked to in a while. And and it's adapted for different age levels. So you have children, correct?
Yeah, 10 and 14.
10 and 14. So this is perfect for them as far as being able to understand the words in the curriculum, but we do have adaptations for folks who have younger kids. So instead of asking like, what does this mural mean to you? You might ask a younger child, like, how does this feel? How do you feel when you look at this image? Or what colors do you see, to kind of get them to reflect and talk about what they're experiencing?
It's beautiful. So I'm curious, it sounds like it's really expanding the lens at how you see yourself, how you see community, how you find your power, and how you find connection with your family and with your community. That's powerful, but through a quite, I want to say simple, but simple isn't easy. Simple in terms of digesting. Can you tell me, I want to know about impact. How has this impacted you? How has this impacted the people that have gone through this process?
Personally, I saw someone say, I wish I could cite them, but because I don't know who the originator was, that entrepreneurship is a spiritual journey. Yes. And that has very much been my experience of pushing through fear. I didn't realize, in many ways, I consider myself pretty unconventional and fearless. But when it came to this, all these things started bubbling to the surface. And so the transformation for me has been one of helping me, like, reigniting hope, like,
Mm.
to see that these communities not only existed but still exist,
Mhm.
and they fought
Mhm.
wars against colonial
Mhm.
plantation society and have systems where gender dynamics are different and
Mm.
women are nurtured and cared for in a way that we don't often see in our society. It just was a reminder that the way things aren't the way
Mhm.
things have to be.
Beautiful.
And I need that. So when I
Yeah.
was 8, I
Mhm. Mhm.
learned what pessimism was because
Mhm.
my dad told me I was a pessimist. And I was like, what does that mean?
Mm.
He was like,
Mm.
gave me the half glass half full, half
Yep.
empty analogy. And I was like, huh, interesting. He's right. So, like,
Mhm.
what is
Mhm.
someone like me? How can I keep reigniting that hope? And for me, it is through community and through when I hear these stories of
Yeah.
not just Maroons, but my own family history. I feel empowered and like want to keep pushing forward.
Right. I think it is important. When I think about family history, my family origin is around they're like the classical pioneers, left Norway, went on the boat, got on the covered wagons, went across the land. And if I think about some of my work that I've had to do on perfectionism and just so committed to my work, I'm like, of course, like, because the women who came before me basically lived in the tundra and we're trying to survive. Like there's this hardness that got translated through that I inherited. It helped me be more gentle to myself, to realize, oh, that's why that is there, right? And be able to
Hmm.
be grateful for that, but also say it's safe now. You can drop your you can relax a little. There's no more tundra. You don't have to survive in the winters, right? Um, you can be more gentle and loving when you have more context for things. So, do you have stories from people who've gone through your process and what impact it's had on them?
Yes, I do. And it's exceeded my expectations. Like I said, there's a lot of fear in this. It felt divinely inspired and I was energized as I created. And then once it's out there, I'm like, oh my God, everybody's going to hate it. But it has been the opposite experience.
Mm.
One person messaged me and said they wish, because I call the curriculum an exploration guide. So it comes
Hmm.
with all these different activities. And then there's the hidden history cards that are the stories of the Maroons.
Mm.
And someone replied back to me like, I wish we had these type of guides for our whole lives, like how to navigate
Hmm.
life in general,
Right.
because it was so impactful for their family,
Hmm.
and how enthusiastic their kids were. Because I didn't position this as a parent teaching a child something. It's
Hmm.
we're learning together.
Mm.
And so children are on an equal plane
That's
as their
beautiful.
parents. And just
Hmm.
depending on the age, the parent is just
Hmm.
more of a facilitator of bringing stuff out. Um, and so seeing their kids in a different light, because there's a lot of like value centered activities of reflections and how do you see yourself? How do you see
Mm.
yourself within this family? So I'm getting a lot of feedback about parents learning a lot about their kids
Mm.
and in many ways raising their expectations
Hmm.
for their kids,
Beautiful.
assuming because they're at a certain age that the depth of feeling and reflection isn't there, and that's being
Right.
revealed through these activities.
Wow. What a
So that's
gift.
been wonderful for me.
What a gift, right? It's not cognitive, right? It's not just cognitive and knowing, it's about the connection that's being created. And I'm guessing it's also embodied for the children who are like, hey, this is cool. This is our family history. This is what I'm proud of. This is what has worked in the past. Like being able to hold that in their body. And I see that now when you tell the first story of that wise student in your class who said, hey, this is heavy. Are you going to make me carry all of this? Like, isn't
Hmm.
there something to balance this that is as true um, and as important to know? That's beautiful. It feels like it's come full circle for you.
It has, it very much has. And it's in many ways, I was creating what I hope to experience and what I do experience, like in my
Mhm.
communities. And I don't have children, so
Mhm.
I don't use parents in the text. I
Mhm.
use the term caregiver
Mhm. Mhm.
because if we get back to the communalness, it's not just going to be parents
Right.
and people who birth children who are raising kids, and it shouldn't
Right.
just be,
Right.
my mom friends go through a lot.
Yeah. Right. That's right. So tell me more about this idea of fictive kinship. I know that's something that is an important concept. Will you share more about that and how that is connected to this bigger conversation about community and families?
Yes. So fictive kinship, my learning of the term comes from like African um, research,
Hmm.
Africology.
Hmm.
It's we identify kin as like blood relations. Fictive kinship is people who are like family but aren't our blood.
Hmm. Hmm.
So fictive kinship networks, the way I operationalize it, is people who are our blood and also those folks who are family by choice or
Hmm.
family by locality,
Hmm.
those networks. And so
Hmm.
in the guides, I prompt folks to bring those folks into the space and do these activities together. Because ultimately, when we look at maroon societies, they're also organized into fictive kinship clans. And depending
Mm.
on the different maroon culture, they're organized different ways. So in
Hmm.
Palenque, for example, they have these things called cuadradas.
Hmm.
Hope I'm
Hmm.
pronouncing that correctly. It's
Hmm.
like age based
Mm.
little clans of people who
Mm.
aren't related, but they're the same
Mm.
age group and have the same interests. So there's people
Mm.
who are musicians. There's
Mm.
people as they get older who handle the funeral rites of the community. They don't have police. They do
Mm.
have a group of people who moderate conflict, and that's
Mm.
their role.
Mhm.
Their fictive kinship clans role within the
Yeah.
community. So like using that foundation and we do this, right? We just don't think
Mhm.
about it intentionally, and just
Mhm.
being more intentional about these communities that we're cultivating and
Mhm.
curating.
Well, and that word intention is kind of a theme that I'm seeing throughout all of what you do. Is how do we intentionally expand the conversation? How do we intentionally connect with our family? Intentionally explore our culture? Like there's so much intentionality in what you do, and it just feels like so urgent right now when we're literally on autopilot scrolling through social media, the mindlessness, right?
Mhm.
um it's so interesting. I don't know what, there's like something inside me I want to share and I'm not sure how it will come out. I was just reading a newsletter from someone I respect and their work I respect, and they talked about the practice of mindfulness and meditation. And And I think this is like another way of being mindful. It's not this,
Mhm.
quiet silence. It's another way of being mindful. It's an embodied way. It's a connected way. And that's what it seems like, the bigger picture your work is doing.
Mhm. I'm writing this down. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, that's how it, I mean, that's what it looks like you're doing from the outside. I love that. This topic is wide and it's deep. And I also want to save time to talk about you and your life. Is there something important that you think your listeners need to understand about your work, either as an educator, as a parent, or as an individual, that we haven't yet touched on?
Mhm. Yes, I would say the core. You hit the nail on the head when I was like, "That's why I'm
Mm-hmm.
writing. Let me write this down." Okay.
Mm-hmm.
um, this embodied mindfulness
Mm-hmm.
and the core of who I am as a human is integrity.
Mm.
And what I've attempted to do with this product and with my business is operate in integrity, like integrity
Mhm.
first,
Mhm.
people first. Um, And that has its, in this world, it has its pluses and minuses. For those who watched Game of Thrones, and I hate how it ended, but I am like Ned Stark, you know,
Okay.
like, I'm going to operate with candor and care. This product was created with candor and care and community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the core of what I want folks to take away from this experience, what I hope folks can build with their communities. And, the bigger picture, like this is just one thing. My big picture is I would love to see local communities do these activities together. And how do we create physical sites of
Yes.
joy and resistance where we are?
Yes. Yes.
That's the big picture.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, I'll make sure that when the listeners are catching up with us, that they'll be able to have links to find out where they can learn more. I'll make sure we put that in the show notes, because I think that's the next step, right? Like, now that this is out there, how do they take it into their lives, into their communities, and have it be not abstract, but, as we were saying, embodied. So do you mind if we turn a little attention to you right now? I think there's so much you've already been through, right? I'm imagining this is a full cycle of transformation for you. And there's, as you said, entrepreneurship is a great way to begin another layer of transformation. I'd love to hear more from you. ATT, ambitious transformation in transition. I always talk about transition first, right? What is the soup you're swimming in? A global transition, family transition. What is your soup of transition right now that you're feeling?
There's quite a bit. I feel like everything. My grandmother is 95, my paternal grandmother, and she's in the process of transitioning. And I use that word when I brought it up to someone else. They were like, "Wait, she's transitioning at 95?" I'm like, "No, no, no. This is not a gender affirming transition. She's, she's passing away." And I went to visit her and spend some time with her. And it's really helping. Help is the wrong word. I'm really reframing what my relationship to family and my relationship to mortality. When you operate like life is short and long at the same time. So what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, right.
I've heard those things all my life, but I'm feeling it for the first time of like, what am I going to do with this life I've been given? And who do I want to be in relation to other people? Because I travel a lot. I left California for a decade. And I'm not the best at keeping in contact with people. And I can't keep in contact with 1,500 folks who, you've befriended over time, but how can I be like intentional with sustaining deep relationships? It's definitely a transit I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah.
And then also with this entrepreneurship journey, expanding what I think is possible. I think just learning about going through this process of studying Maroons and the entrepreneur piece underneath it, it's like I really can create the life that I want in community. And then what do I want? I am a critical race theorist, and as an educator, it was easy for me to identify what I don't want to exist.
Right.
I'm now in a space where I'm identifying then what if I don't want this?
Right.
What does the opposite look like?
Right.
And then who do I need to be for that to actually happen? So it's lots of this. This talk came right at the right time because I've been thinking a lot about these things.
Yeah. And this is where it's hard to tease out when I talk about transformation. It's internal led, external led, or performance led, or maybe all three at the same time, right? And external led would be like, oh, the pandemic happened, I lost my job. And internal would be, I woke up one day and I felt vastly different. Or performance led is you have this ambitious goal. And sometimes it is murky to decide, what is this from the outside or is this coming from the inside? When you were talking,
Mm-hmm.
I actually I had tears well up in my eyes, because I feel like we're at such a pivot point right now of, at least where I stand with
Mm-hmm.
my views. We're getting a lot clearer on what we don't want, even though it's a long time coming, on many layers of
Mm-hmm.
identity and power, right, in history. And then the question is, like you said, what's on the other side, and what is it going to ask of me so that I can create that, right? Because there's also security in known
Mm-hmm.
systems, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's insecurity when you don't know what you're going toward, right? And maybe it's different for me because I hold so many dominant identities. I'm actually letting go of power, and you know what I mean. So there's that
Mm-hmm.
thing, and so it's this question of, what are we going toward? And I have this image in my hands where I'm not doing it on my own. I'm holding hands because I'm not doing it alone.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I think is so beautiful about where we're at right now collectively, is we have not a choice. We have enough momentum now, um, to make those leaps. And I think they are a million individual leaps. It's you with your business and those conversations, right? It's me with my business and my conversations. It's that person with their son and that conversation, right? It's all of those millions of small steps is what I think will take that leap. I actually kind of hope it's that way, and not like this massive explosion of who knows what, which will force it. I
Mm-hmm.
hope we have the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to exercise agency and take our steps to make that movement, rather than it being some catastrophic shift that makes it undeniable. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's just what I'm processing while I heard you. There's so much hope in there. There is so much hope. So what does ambitious look like for you right now? If, the way I define it, it has to be outside of scope or scale from the external. So for me, ambitious this summer
Mm-hmm.
was doing less. That's ambitious for me, right? For someone else, it might be
Mm-hmm.
being bolder. Another, it might be quieter, right? So what about for you? What does ambitious look like for you right now?
I listened to the podcast about what is ambition. So I was like jotting notes, and initially I wrote down like my goal is to write a weekly newsletter, just be consistent in
Mm-hmm.
building a relationship with my audience. But I was like, you know what? That's actually not it. What is it for me is saying what's on my mind in a way that adds value to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's ambitious to me. I had a brand and I didn't like that term, but that's what
Mm-hmm.
one of my sorority sisters say. She was like, Crystal, you have a brand. Like people listen to what you say and
Mm-hmm.
they value what you say. And over time, I've receded into myself. This is on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Like just seeing some of the negativity, people feeling entitled
Yeah.
to my opinion. My
Right.
DMs, it was
Right.
always a man in my DMs. What's your opinion and thoughts on this? You know,
You're like, here's my
so I
PayPal
just kind of
account.
receded it.
Here's my
Right,
PayPal account.
exactly.
I will meet you on a phone for a consult.
Exactly. And I'd answer their question and then they
Mm.
debate me. And I'm like, I told you my
Mm.
opinion. And this is,
Mhm.
and so it's seeing how other people were treated who were like very public. I was like, you know
Mhm.
what? I don't think I want this.
Right.
But as I'm communicating these stories and what I'm doing, like I can't live in that fear of the
Right.
worst case scenario. Or so for me, ambitious is that putting myself out there consistently and
Yeah.
doing it in a way, I don't want to. I don't want to piggyback off of what's hot at the time. Like
Mhm.
that's not empowering to me. That doesn't give me energy. But I do
Mhm.
know I can often add nuance that isn't
Yes.
there, and I
Yes.
will withhold that nuance. And so, what's ambitious
Mm.
to me is like putting that out there.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful. I see your
Oh,
integrity
thanks.
shine through in that example for sure. That's beautiful. Oh, I know we could go on forever, but can you help the audience understand what is next for you? If they want to learn more about you and what you're working on, what should they know?
Okay. So you can follow along with the business and the product at emancipatededucation.com. That's where you can purchase, also learn more about our mission. And I do have a blog, if you click newsletter, that talks about what's gone into the development of this product, like sharing more of those thoughts that I've been afraid to share. There's also an Instagram page, emancipate_ed. And as far as like what's next for me is really thinking about, I know what kind of business owner I want to be. I know what kind of business I want to run. And like you said, who do I need to be? Well, I'm already that person. So it's what do I need to do to actually to run a business that way? Because it's very easy to just plug into the systems that already exist. But what I don't want to do is to create something that continues to harm the environment. So I'm looking at researching sustainable business practices, like environmentally sustainable. And then what does that look like in product creation?
Oh, wonderful.
That's next for me. And then finding community of people who are already doing it.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I'm also hearing the people that you're speaking to are educators, families, right? And individuals who are interested in sort of going through that transformation process around how they see themselves and the way they engage with each other as kin, you said. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Oh, I love to see what you're doing. I mean, there's so much I'm taking away from our conversation today. And it feels like just the beginning. Some of the things that were bubbling up for me, it feels like they're not quite fully articulated yet. There's something much deeper and bigger about what you're doing that I think is going to have a beautiful ripple effect. So thank you for showing up, even though you're afraid. We know I know that as an entrepreneur, I'm celebrating my 9th business year, and I know that journey is hard.
Congratulations.
It is hard, right? And I just hold for you. I hold for you. I talk about this on my podcast, the end game, whatever end game you have for you as that, business owner with integrity and impact and all of that. I hold that for you because it will be possible for you, in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever that time frame is. But I can feel it. It's worth the ups and down roller coaster. Wonderful. So thank you. And thank you everyone who's been listening today. You're here with In Transit with Sundae-Bean. It's so wonderful to have Crystal here with us today. So thank you, Crystal, for being part of this.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
It's wonderful. And I think it's only appropriate that we end with the words of Audre Lorde. Without community, there is no liberation.